The nice thing for our project is we haven't had to spend a penny on it, and yet it's been significantly de-risked. Our neighbor has land directly north and directly south, and we know we have the same lithium brines that they've been exploring. It is critical for the US to shore up its food security and its supply chain. That is why you've seen the US government move to add potash to the critical minerals list. Our exploration target on the potash side is in the 600 million to billion tons, and the grades would be 19 to 29%. A big project globally would produce 1 million tons a year. This would have that potential given the scale.
Hello and welcome back to The Next Big Rush. I am here with a very special guest, CEO of American Critical Minerals, Simon Clarke. Simon, welcome.
Pleasure to be here, Fabi. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. Simon, I have you here today, and I'll be honest with you. This is kind of a somewhat selfish interview for me because I want to learn more about these two minerals. And my life is kind of crazy right now. And I don't have the time to sit down and do all the due diligence. So I am happy to have you here so you can let us know a little bit more about maybe one commodity that's starting to come back into people's radars, especially with the recent moves, the US government, and the investments that they're making, especially in the US. And one that is very much off the radar for most investors. The only guy that I can think of that I know actively invests in this other commodity is Rick Rule, and it's not really mentioned by anybody else ever. So can you please let us know of the thesis behind lithium and potash? They're US-based projects, which I love. Don't need to go too much into detail, from the whole US perspective. But, the news is almost like you have to hit refresh every day. And there's something in the news that affects every project in the US within the critical mineral space. So teach us, please, Simon, what's hot about lithium and potash?
Yeah, absolutely, Fabi. Well, I think lithium is, as you say, a lot better understood by the investment community in general. Obviously, it's had since I started being involved in it in 2015, it's had two or three cycles. We are at the bottom of a cycle now where, I think everyone could see the move to electric vehicles globally, and obviously the need for storage to back up a lot of the grid infrastructure, not only in the US and North America, but globally as well. We're not going to move to a new paradigm in terms of energy if we don't have the grid to support all the charging we'll need for electric vehicles, for example. So it covers both sides. I think lithium's been in a bit of a downturn, because people have questioned whether the EV revolution is happening as quickly as people think. And so I think, you can certainly say that some of the growth in places like North America has been slower than originally anticipated, but it's still growing roughly 10% a year, 20% globally. Places like China and other jurisdictions globally, are growing exponentially on the EV side. So I think, you saw lithium go really high, like a lot of young commodities, too high, scared people, came crashing down. I guess a lot of supply came on at those high prices. And now, obviously, there's been no investment in it for a year or two. And you're starting to see the green shoots. It's now come off its floor at about $6,000 a ton, back over $10,000 a ton, and looking like it's going to go higher. And you're starting to see a lot of news with the US government, despite some rhetoric around, well, people can buy whatever vehicle they want, which is fine. The EVs have to stand on themselves economically. You're also seeing the US government this week, a lot of rumors that they're going to put a 10% stake into Lithium Americas in Nevada.
That's exploded the price of, of
It's
Lithium
unbelievable,
Americas.
isn't it?
Yes.
And my former company, American Lithium's had a big bounce this week as well, and so it's starting to look good. What I would say is the project we have has very much been focused on potash for the last 10, 12 years. but we also have a neighbor that is has land contiguous to our project that has done an inordinate amount of heavy lifting and work. They've taken it through pilot DFS on one of the projects. They now have an MOU with POSCO, the big Korean player. And just this week, they signed an offtake agreement, definitive offtake agreement with LG Chem, who are one of the biggest battery manufacturers globally. So I think you're starting to see things happen on lithium. And the nice thing for our project is we haven't had to spend a penny on it, and yet it's been significantly de-risked. Our neighbor has land directly north and directly south. We're the meat and the sandwich, if you like, and we know we have the same lithium brines that they've been exploring. So we're very excited about lithium, more and more so. As I mentioned, potash was the original focus for the project. And potash is the key ingredient in most fertilizers that are used in crops globally. What it does is it enables, as farming happens, the soils get depleted. And so muriate of potash, or MOP, is the key ingredient that helps put those nutrients back into the soils. It's obviously naturally occurring. It's been the key ingredient, as I say, for fertilizers, and it also helps make crops resistant to disease. So it's a really important mineral. Obviously, the global population is not decreasing, it's continuing to grow, which is putting a big strain on the planet in general, but obviously food supply. And so you're now getting this theme in the world around food security and the need. A lot of farmers in Africa and South America and other parts of the world just cannot afford to use fertilizers. And so getting fertilizers into these areas and increasing production is key. But also in North America, I mean, you see the farming in the US is growing. It has to grow, and you're seeing the potash growth in the US grow at a compound annual growth rate of 5% potash usage. So it's a really interesting product. It's a product that has been dominated from a supply perspective by Canada, Russia, Belarus, China, a number of countries that have supplied the US historically. And the US produces very little. It imports roughly 94% of all potash that is consumed. And so, with what's going on with tariffs, trade disputes with Canada and obviously China and other parts of the world, it is critical for the US to shore up its food security and its supply chains. And so that is why you've seen the US government move to add potash to the critical minerals list. And what that means, if you're on the critical mineral list, and this applies to both lithium and potash, is it opens up the potential for expedited permitting and critically large amounts of capital that are available to help these projects develop, whether it's from the Department of Defense, Department of Energy, the Department of Agriculture. Now we've seen the DFC, which is historically funded projects globally, starting to fund projects across North America as well. So it's a really interesting and good time to be in the critical mineral space, and especially when you have two of them in one project.
That is very interesting indeed. I was just thinking, okay, so trying to understand where we are in the cycle here. For lithium, I think most people watching this will understand that, we did have a couple of cycles, and we're definitely closer to, a past bottom than we are an ultimate top, because we've seen the ups and downs, etc. When it comes to potash, is it as volatile as some of the other commodities that we usually talk about? Or is it something that is, less volatile due to supply and demand being somewhat more stable?
That's a great question. It's a it's a it's a better known commodity, and it's had a longer history of being traded than lithium. Lithium is relatively nascent, which explains some of the swings. And potash typically is more stable. It tends to grow as the demand continues to grow. The price continues to react to that. However, you can see major global events impact it. It went, the price went to $600 or $700 a ton when the Russians invaded Ukraine. and Belarus and Russia came off the market for potash supply, or on the face of it, came off the market for potash supply. It spiked. It came back down, and typically it's in the $300 to $400 range. It was like I think about a year ago around $280 a ton. It's now back up to 360, 370. Um, the point for the US is US farmers pay more than that because they have to import it. So if you can produce, there's also a transportation dividend in the mix. So it's in a good phase. It's moved up 30 or 40% over the last few months. And again, it's now a critical mineral, and there's a big focus on shoring up the supply chain.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure it's something that we'll always need because agriculture is just the basics of life. And
Yeah,
it's interesting
absolutely.
to get exposure to both commodities, which is kind of unusual. I mean, usually you get what gold and silver and maybe, copper and moly or something like that, but potash and lithium is a combination I've never seen. Which begs the geological question: where in the world are you? I mean, we know this is in the US, but which state exactly? And what makes this flagship project so special?
So we are in Utah. We're in a big evaporite basin called the Paradox Basin. Has a deep history, and you often find potash associated with oil and gas. So it was a big oil and gas basin back in the day, and there's still a fair amount of gas produced from it. And it's the only what they call a super potash basin in the US. That's a basin that's capable of producing, over 1 billion tons of potash, and there's 7 or 8 of those globally, including, of course, a massive one in Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Canada, which is why Canada is a leader in potash. So it's a big basin. The earliest production in the US was from a mine 20 minutes away from us as the crow flies, run by Intrepid Potash. It's a nicey company with about a 400 million US market cap. We're 20 minutes away. We're targeting the same potash cycles, which are typically at about 4 to 5,000 feet down in depth. And you'll understand this from a uranium perspective. Effectively, for to be the most efficient in potash, you in situ mine like you do in uranium. So it's called solution mining. You pump solution into the formation, pump it back up, and then with evaporation from the sun, you then concentrate the potash. So that's been the historic way of doing it. It's what our neighbor does. They've done it successfully. Not every potash formation around the world is enabled for solution mining. We're lucky that in the paradox, the depth means that you've got good heat in the formation, so you don't need to heat up the solution you pump down. So it makes it more efficient and cost effective. What we then found, and that was why this project was set up 12 years ago, the land was put together by a very famous geologist, John Gregg. He's well known in the Vancouver world. He found a lot of gold, probably 30 to 40 million ounces over his career, but he was historically a oil and gas geologist. Now, John's now well into his 80s, but he put this project together 10 to 12 years ago because he could see it was a flat-lying piece of land which is critical in the heart of the main potash fairway. So the company's been focused on potash for 10 years. Took a long time. The BLM, the federal agency, takes a long time to permit potash projects. There's environmental aspects. There was an EIA on this project, I think, for about 5 years. But anyway, we got our permits on the potash side at the end of last year. Um, and then, as I say, 2 to 3,000 feet below where the potash is, you have the lithium brines that underpin the formation. Not everywhere, but as I say, we have our neighbor who's contiguous with us to the north and adjacent to us to the south, who has done a great job of exploring, developing, de-risking, and is now at the point where it's taking definitive offtakes and had a very successful commercial pilot with Coke technology. So it's great to see that. We didn't, when the project was put together, everyone was thinking potash, but now we know we've also got the lithium side as well. And our goal here, there's a lot of historic data from the oil and gas wells that were drilled, 33 of them across our land and in the surrounding areas. So we know what we've got, but we still need to drill it ourselves. We have big exploration targets under 43-101 from that old data. And now we want to go and put 2 to 3 holes in this, come up with a 43-101 resource and move it to PFS. So that's really the next phase that we're looking at. And all the work we've been doing is to position ourselves for that. And we are now permitted to drill up to 7 holes. And in potash formations, in uranium, you have hundreds of holes to get a resource. Here, you only need 2 to 3 because of the blanket nature of the mineralization.
I was going to ask because that doesn't sound like many holes.
It's not, but they are expensive. They're deep. You're going down to
Yeah.
8,000 feet.
Hmm.
So, but again, with all the data we have on the project, 2 to 3 should be sufficient for us to put together a big resource. And the nice thing is because it's higher in the formation, we can test the potash and then go down and test the lithium brines all in one hole.
Okay, so this is definitely going to be, a forward-looking statement, but what size of resource are we targeting here? Give me a
So
range.
yeah, so our exploration target on the potash side is in the 600 million to billion tons, grading, and that's silverite, which is the best mineralization for potash, and the grades would be 19 to 29%. So, as you take that into a resource, you're probably looking at 200 to 300 million tons. A big project globally would produce 1 million tons a year. This would have that potential given the scale.
Mhm.
Our neighbors produce 100,000 tons a year, so that would be an easy first step, just to give you some sense of the scale. And then, on the lithium side, the resource that our neighbors have to the south, that Anson has, is about 1.5 million tons of lithium carbonate equivalent. I expect they have similar on the north. We are putting an exploration target together for the lithium, which will be announced shortly. I would imagine it would be similar to that. So, they're targeting an initial production of 10,000 tons of lithium carbonate equivalent battery grade, which they've proved they can do a year as an initial step. So, I think again that would be very reasonable to assume we could do the same, on ours and probably grow that, double that production over time.
Okay, so for the people who are adding your company to their watch list or they're buying the stock now and
Mhm.
they're, somewhat new to the story, what can they expect news flow wise in the next 3 to 6 to 9 months?
Yeah, so what you will see in the next few weeks here is we will be putting out a 43-101 exploration target for lithium. Lithium in the paradox also has a byproduct of bromine, so there'll be an exploration target on that. That's just as a byproduct of the lithium. We will then update our technical report, so that'll be updated. So it'll cover both potash and lithium. And we are reprocessing, or I shouldn't say reprocessing, we're reevaluating some of the seismic that was shot over the land and shows that it's flat. So there'll be news on that. And then really once we're through that phase, our goal is to position the company to start drilling. So, ideally that'll be in a 3 to 6 month time frame. As I say, we have permits in hand. All we have to do is do some final bonding. And once we've paid the bonding, and then we can move forward and drill. It will require us adding additional capital to do that. And, as the stock gains momentum here and there's currency in it, then obviously the next big piece, again, being permitted to drill is a nice position to be in, and that'll be the main catalyst. So, lots of news flow around bringing lithium into the mix. into the seismic that we have in the area, targeting the holes, and then moving into drilling, as I say, over the next 3 to 6 months. And that'll be a big catalyst for us. It'll validate the historic data, but it'll also give us what we need to come out with a maiden resource on both potash and lithium.
So, what is it like to work in Utah compared to other US states?
Utah is a great mining state. It was ranked, I think, 2023 number one for mining investment by the Fraser Institute globally. I haven't seen the 24 numbers, but it's always in the top 10. So it's a pro mining state. It's a good place to do business, reasonable taxation, etc. So it's a good place to be exploring and developing and ultimately, producing. The nice thing for us is where we are with Moab mine facility from Intrepid. There's already a rail spur in place. There's major roads. So moving our product to, whether it's the agricultural belt in the US or the car manufacturing in Detroit and other places, the transportation is excellent. There's plenty of power. Obviously, they know mining. There's potash mining just up the road. So, we have all the skill sets we need to continue to develop this and ultimately for a mine to be built and production to start. So it's a great state to be in.
This is going to sound probably like a silly question, but if you have producing neighbors, are they the best suitor here to take you out, or is the plan to, build it
It's
yourselves and move
it's
in?
It's a great question. It's not a silly question at all. Yeah, I mean, Intrepid, they have a big facility already. It would make sense for them. One of the things they've been, working for 50 years, drilling and solution mining. So they need to continue to add new horizons to continue to grow. And we would be a very logical fit. And one school of thought would be you could mine what we have, concentrate it, and then ship it over to Moab for processing. So Intrepid, to my mind, is a very logical fit. Obviously, there are other players out there. We have regular dialogue with some of the big Canadian players who also have US hubs. They don't mine down there, but they have US hubs. And then of course we have the lithium side. So we are the meat in the sandwich. Anson owns the land to the north and south. They're about 120 million market cap. We're at half a billion in the last lithium cycle. And as I say, they've done a lot of good work. And then there are a number of other players that, we've had a number of inbounds from oil and gas and other players who are looking to get into this sector. So, I do think there will be, a number of suitors as we move forward here, especially with the critical minerals angle as well in the US. So, but it's a great question. To my mind, Intrepid would make the most sense. I don't know what their plans are, but for sure, we're so close to them, and we're targeting exactly the same potash horizons that they've produced from for 50 years.
Yeah, I mean the financials here probably look better for them since they have the infrastructure versus anybody else that wants to come in and would have
Absolutely.
to build it from
A-
scratch.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so Simon, how can people find out more about American Critical Minerals?
Well, if you just check out our website, we've updated it recently. There's a full presentation in there as well, which has a bunch of information on lithium and potash and our project. Also has some nice, we've been using Verify for a little bit, and they've put together some very
That's
nice
great stuff.
maps, which
Yeah,
which
very
really
helpful.
help understand where we are and what we've got. So that's probably the best way. And anyone can reach out to me. My details are on the website. We have a information line as well that's monitored all the time. So there's plenty of ways to get hold of. But again, happy to chat to anyone who's interested.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Simon. I'll catch up with you when you have more news uh, fingers crossed. Good news. I think you guys are at the right place at the right time. I've never seen anything like what's happening in the US right now for almost everything. It's hard to pick a commodity that isn't doing well. It doesn't have a bright future in the US. So, best of luck to you.
Thank you, Fabi. Really appreciate it.